Welcome to Sewing with Sandy. Today we're going to take Mood Sewciety jacket and trousers and make them up. It's a free pattern and we use this really lovely chocolate pontoroma from Mood. So the jacket has princess seams in the front. It's fully lined and we use this really wild bright red lining. It has a really nice shawl, lapel collar, and pockets. So inset pockets. And you're gonna love it. It's easy to do. It's great for a beginner. The trousers are fabulous. They are have a sewn-in waistband with a side zip and patch pockets and narrow legs, kind of wide. So the original pattern from Mood, the Ercilla suit, is made with a jacquard, a red jacquard. If you look on the website, you'll see it. And I'll put all the links for this stuff below. You'll be able to see it. And it looks great. It's a very unconstructed jacket, but with a little bit of princess fitting in the front, and then wide leg pants that taper down very narrow. Now the pattern is 2018, so it's a little old and it's a little dated, but these long jackets are back in, and you can always use a good pair of trousers. So we updated it a little bit by using this pontoroma, so it's knit and it's stretchy, and then for the pants I tapered in the leg quite a bit. So because we're working with a pattern that was made for a woven, I cut it 2 sizes smaller and then sewed it with a small seam allowance, like a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So that made it like a 1.5 sizes smaller because you want negative ease on something that's stretchy like that. And the jacket is great. It has great beginner techniques, I would say. If you want a couture jacket, this is not the jacket for you. But if you're a beginning sewer, it's perfect because it's got some nice jacket details like the shawl collar and the princess seams in the pockets, and it's fully lined. So those are really great details. It's missing some of the finer finishes, but I think for a beginner, it's a really good jacket. So let's get started. All right, now that our pants are done, we're going to get started on our jacket. And I actually stitched up the lining first. I like stitching up the lining first because it gives me an opportunity to try it on and perfect any fit issues before I go ahead and construct the jacket. I did all of my fit trials before I cut it out, and I was pretty happy with the way it fits. But I made up the lining. It's all set to go. This facing part of the lining, you want to make sure that this facing part is the same fabric or a contrasting fabric, because when your jacket is finished, this is actually going to be the roll part of the collar. So if you have, mine happens to be brown, it's going to be the same color, but if you wanted a contrast, say you wanted a black lapel, this would be black. But this is what sews to the jacket and finishes the edge. So this is done. Now the first step on making the jacket is to make the welts. And you take this welt piece here and you fold it in half, right sides together. Now it has to be interfaced. You want to interface them because you want a little structure. And then you fold them in half, right sides together. You do both of them. And then you're going to take your pocket and your pocket lining. And on the right side, I like to baste mine first. On the right side of the pocket, you're going to add this welt piece. So I'm going to add it. The instructions say to sandwich this, which you do eventually, but I prefer to attach this, then it's one piece. And so the angle is going to go the way you see it here. This angle's in, because what happens when you turn it right sides up, you want this to continue, this side to continue with the welt, and this side to continue with the welt, because this is where your hand goes in. And also you overlap the edges a smidge on either side. This one got clipped off. That gives you this straight line. If I had moved this tiny point to the very edge of my pocket, my welt would be off. So I want that just a little bit to the side here. Now that I've done that, and this is one piece, I'm going to take the right side of my lining and pin that, and I'm going to go back and stitch this because my lining will now, trying to put all 3 of them together at the same time is doable, but it's a little bit challenging. I think that for me, this makes more sense. It's just a second row of stitching, but it doesn't slide off, which is really what I don't want. I don't want this welt to slip down. Now it's attached and I have everything all in one section. So I'm going to finish this pocket and my next pocket, and we'll come back. All right, so after I basted my pocket welt to the pocket, I went back and stitched the lining, and you're going to press the lining backwards and then press it forward. So now you have this really nice lined pocket that's finished on the top edge. We have two of them. And I went to this goes onto your side front fabric. So you stitch it onto the bottom of the right side of the side front inside the seam allowance. Okay, I'm going to tell you a little secret. I put these pockets on backwards. The instructions you're going to see right now show the pockets going on the wrong sides. So make sure when you put the pockets on, you reverse what I did. Put them on the other sides. So my pocket slant to the back, my pockets slant to the back instead of slanting to the front. And you know, I was well into the construction process before I actually realized that I had put them on backwards. But I haven't made this pattern before. I made it as we were sewing it and videotaping it, and I just missed it. You know, but I'm okay with it. The pockets are, with the Pontoroma, it's a very slouchy jacket, so the pockets are fine. Nobody's going to notice. You'll know, I'll know, you know, anybody that watches this video will know. But I'll say to that, I don't think there are going to be too many people that are going to say, hey, your pockets are on wrong. So, I don't think that's a big deal. The construction part, the rest of the jacket fits really great, and I'm happy with it. So, yeah, keep it a secret. And we're going to take our side front pieces, and we're going to lay them right side up. And then the pocket is going to get stitched to the bottom of the side front, like so. So if you're using a 5/8 inch seam allowance, you want to stitch it inside the 5/8 inch seam allowance, because this is just we're just attaching it to our front. And you can see on the pattern piece there's a notch here, and that corresponds to the notch on the pocket piece. So that's what we're going to do. And we're going to stitch down this side and stitch down this side and stitch across the bottom just to hold it, so now it becomes one unit. Obviously you're going to leave this open because that's where the pocket's going to go, but this now becomes one unit as you sew the jacket together. This isn't flopping around. So we're going to go ahead and stitch this within our seam allowance. I'm going to line it up really well, pin it, and stitch the sides and the bottom within my seam allowance. All right, we stitched our pockets to both of our side fronts. We've just gone, you can see I just stitched them in like 1/4 of an inch right at the edge of my presser foot, just so they're in place. And now we're going to assemble the whole front of our jacket. And I like to lay my pieces out. I've been sewing for a really long time, but particularly with a solid color like this where you can't tell the right side from the wrong side, it's really important to lay your pieces out. So these are my side fronts, and the lining goes together exactly the same way, except the facing piece is your fashion fabric, and then the lining is the lining fabric, obviously. This is my center front, and you can see, you know, where these pins are makes a really big difference, because I want to make sure that I get the right sides matching together. So this goes together, right sides up, like this. So these pieces are going to get sewn together, and that takes care of my front. So I'm going to sew those two together. Then after I finish that, I'm going to sew my back piece along the center back. So right sides together. They should already be right sides together, and we cut them out together, so they should be beautiful. You can see they're right sides together. I know you're saying to yourself, why is there a seam down the center back? Well, there's a seam down the center back. It's a fitting seam. It'll help with construction a little bit. And if you need to take the back in, this is where you would do it, right? Also, if you wanted something with a little more shape, this one is very boxy in the back, you could add some fisheye darts in the center back. So what you would do for that, let me just put these out of the way, put a little pin in them because that's how they go together, just so I know. So if you wanted to take in the back a little bit, and you can do this even after you've finished construction of the garment, you would put a fisheye dart, you would put it on and have someone pin it, but it would go from about here to here. Should be 4 inches from the center. You would do one on each side, and a fisheye dart is essentially a dart that has 2 points. So where a bust dart has 1 point and goes into a seam, the fisheye dart starts at a point here and gets as big as you need it, and then comes back to a point down here. So those are super easy to put in. I remember once one of my daughters was working as a wait staff, and they had to wear white shirts. Well, women's white shirts are outrageously expensive, and the only difference between men's white shirts and women's white shirts is the side they button on, which nobody pays attention to, and the fact that they have darts in them, because women have more of a curve where guys are just super straight. So I bought a bunch of men's shirts because she was going through shirts, you know, every other week she needed a new shirt because she would spill stuff on it. I mean, that's the nature of the business. So I bought a bunch of men's shirts, and I put fisheye darts in the back and fisheye darts in the front. They fit her adorably. They were half the price. I could get 2 men's shirts for the price of 1 woman's shirt. I saved some money, and it took me maybe, I don't know, an hour to do half a dozen shirts, and she was off and running and all set for the season. So think about that. If you don't like the boxy shape and you want something a little bit more fitted, I mean, this suit is made to be kind of boxy, like 90s style, without the shoulder pads, but very straight, fitted in the front, but very straight in the back, and the pants are kind of baggy. We've changed this, so my whole front together. I'm going to sew these 2 pieces. I'm going to sew the back, and then I'm going to sew the back to the sides, and I'll have one big long piece. Okay, I have my pieces all sewn together, my jacket. So I have my jacket front, jacket side front, back, jacket side front, and front. And I'm going to tell you a little secret, which isn't a secret because you've already seen it now. When I finished this, I realized I put the pockets on backwards. That is a little bit of a problem, and my options were to rip it out, which at this point it would mean ripping out both of these seams, then ripping the pocket out and doing the same thing on the other side and switching the pockets around. And you know what? It's not that important to me. I don't think it's an issue, and if someone looks at me and says, hey, your pockets are on wrong, I'll be like, oh, really? Oh my goodness. So don't do them this way. And I have noted in the video previously, as you saw, that the pockets were on incorrectly. So, you know, things happen, and sometimes it's worth ripping it out. Sometimes it's not. And I love this jacket, but that is not going to make a difference for me. If a seam was wrong, then, you know, that would be one thing. But it's the pocket, and it blends right in. I'm not adding any trim to this, so you almost don't even see. It's just a very small detail. And unless I'm standing there with my hands in my pocket, nobody's really going to notice. And even then, they might not. So my next step is going to be to sew the shoulder seams together. So I'm just going to flip this over. Now this gets a little tricky because we have this shawl collar. I want to sew the right sides of the shawl collar together. So that's this section. I'm going to turn it upside down. You're going to be looking at it upside down, but it's easier to see the pieces. So we have this weird neckline going on, right? And we're going to sew these 2 pieces. We're going to sew these 2 pieces together right here. So this is the back of the shawl collar. So we're going to stitch those together. And then I like to sew my shoulder seams together. So I'm just going to, here's the back, my back neck, and my back shoulder seams, and then the shoulder seams for the front. So here's the back of this collar that we're going to sew. This is the shoulder seam for the front. And then this is the neck edge. So we're going to sew this shoulder seam, and we're going to sew it right to the crotch of that 5/8 of an inch. So we'll sew it up to here, and then we'll go and turn the back, put the back on, and sew the back of the neck. But let's just do the shoulder seams first. I prefer to have these princess seams pressed to the side. So we want to make sure we stitch them that way. So I'm just going to match up my shoulders, my front to the back. And what's going to end up happening is I'm going to end up clipping this so I can move this around. So I'm going to pin that. I'm going to sew this shoulder seam, the other shoulder seam, and the back neck seam. And you want to stitch. So you're going to have this, you're not going to match this all the way to the edge. This shoulder, this seam is going to come to the 5/8 inch mark, right? So you're going to have this little leftover on the back neck edge, because we're going to clip that and turn, we're going to clip this actually and turn it so it finishes off the back. But let's just get these seams done first, and then I'll show you how to do that. You know, at one point you can sew this and then sew the shoulders and the neck all at once, and when you get a little experience under your belt, but it's much easier to do it like piecemeal. So we're going to do this step by step. All right, at this point we have something that's very much resembles a jacket. I've given it a good press, and I've sewn my shoulder seams and this center back seam for my shawl collar. Now I'm going to attach the collar, and here is where you would do this all in one step, but we broke it down into two just to make it a little bit easier. Grab my scissors. So the first thing we want to make sure is we line up this seam on this collar, shawl collar extension with the back seam, and I'm pushing one to the left and one to the right so I can get a really nice butt on my seam. And I pin both edges of my seam allowances, that way I know they're going to stay out of the way. Now I want to turn this corner that I stitched to, so I'm going to cut to the seam allowance and pin this. You gotta kind of make it go where you want it to go. Pin this around. You have this straight piece going into this curved area. So you can see you're going to have this, you're stitched to here. If you were stitching it straight, you would stitch to here, pivot, and stitch around. I prefer to stitch off, and I'm going to start stitching right where I ended there. And sometimes I don't go quite far enough. You can just go back and redo that. So let's take a look again at this side. Here's my seam. I'm going to clip to the seam allowance, and that allows it to open up and turn. And then just pin it like that. All right, so now we've stitched this neckline. We have these crazy little points coming out here, but what you want is you want to have this nice corner going around the top of your collar. All right, so we've done that. The last step before we add the lining is to put the sleeves on. So here is my jacket with my backward pockets. And the sleeve, your sleeve pattern, has notches up here on the sides and then one at the top. This notch matches up with your shoulder seam, so you want to make sure you mark that. And then you want to make sure that you mark this double notch. The double notch means it goes to the back, that part of the sleeve. And you can see I've sewn my sleeve together, right sides together. And you can see that the sleeve is not symmetrical, right? This piece is larger than this piece, and that's because the back of our bodies is larger than the front of our bodies. And you'll see this a lot with jackets because we need that extra room. So I've marked the back of my sleeve and I've marked the top center of my sleeve, so I know that that matches on my jacket. And I'm going to turn it inside right. I'm going to lay my jacket out in front of me. So now I have this mark that means this is the back of the jacket, and my sleeve is on the right side The jacket is right side up, the sleeve is right side up. Here's my mark, my pin mark to match my shoulder seam, and the pin that marks the back of my sleeve is towards the back of my jacket. And I want to sew this, because this is knit, I'm not going to put any gathering stitches in here, and you can certainly look at other videos for sewing a sleeve into a woven. But because this is knit, we don't need any gathering. It's going to fit together really well. And if we hadn't had to do the neckline, I would have done it open, but you can explore all kinds of ways to do knit sleeves. We have lots of videos about them, and we also have lots of videos about set-in sleeves. But this one we're going to do just straight. It's going to fit, but I want to match that pin up with the shoulder seam, and I want the sleeve to go to the feed dogs. So I'm going to reach in and pair up this pin and my shoulder seam right side together and kind of flip it around. And that way I know I've got the mark where I want it. And then, like all my other set-in sleeves, I'm going to go down and mark the back edge here and take my side seam and my sleeve seam and butt those two together. And then I'm going to pin underneath the arm 1-to-1 up into about where the notches are, because we don't need any easing underneath our arm for sure. We don't need any extra fabric down there. And what I'm left with on either side is what has to be eased in. So I have this convex and concaved seam that I want to pin together, very much similar to the princess seams that we had in the front of the jacket. So I'm going to just put a few pins in there, match up the seams, edges, the raw edges of my seams, and I'm using my fingers down below to kind of ease this in. And look at that, that fits beautifully. This needs a little bit more work. We do want those edges to match as best we can. But yeah, that fits gorgeous. So I'm going to go stitch those sleeves in, and then we're going to be ready to talk about putting our jacket and lining. Right, we put our sleeves on. We put our sleeves on, and if you're at all nervous about putting the sleeves in, baste them before, especially with a knit, because the knit stitch is a nightmare to take out. But you want to baste your sleeves in, try it on, make sure you're happy there aren't any rumples, give it a good press, and try it on, make sure that you've got it exactly where you want. Because if you need to take in a seam, you can take it in now and take it in on the lining and before you put them together. So let's talk about the lining. The way this jacket is assembled, the finished assembly, is to sew the whole outside seam, which would be all this neck edge all the way around the bottom, to sew the garment and the lining right sides together, which is fine, except what you're going to end up with at the bottom of your jacket is a seam. Now, my lining, if it peeks out at the bottom, is going to be no bueno. If you look at a really well constructed jacket, the lining will be shorter than the fashion fabric. So your hem would look something more like this on the inside of the jacket, as opposed to these two pieces being sewed together. Because seriously, it's very easy for this to stretch more than this, and you're going to get drag down at the bottom, and you're going to hate it. You're not going to be happy with it at all. So if your fabrics match and they're close and you're okay with an edge right at the end of your garment, go ahead and put them right sides together and sew them. So the last two steps are to hem the jacket and hem the sleeves. So we're going to take our jacket and put it right side up. We're going to take our lining and put it right side down. And we're going to bag them together. Now, this will give me a seam along the bottom of my jacket. And ideally, that is not the way to go. Had I made this pattern before, I would have known this. So since I'm making it and producing it at the same time, surprise, here we are. I have a bright red lining and a brown jacket. So I'm going to be very careful and tack up my lining, because this lining will probably stretch much faster than this jacket will stretch, and I don't want lining hanging down at the bottom. So I'll show you how to fix that once we get the jacket all together. But typically, the way a lining comes in, the jacket has an edge. The fashion fabric is rolled over an inch or two on the jacket, inside of the jacket, so you don't see the lining hanging down. But we will, we're gonna go with the pattern, we're gonna attack it that way. So what we wanna do is we want right sides together, we wanna match all our seams all the way around. I don't have any pins. Took my pins off to try the jacket on because I wanted to make sure I was happy with the way that the jacket fit. So I'm going to pin the center back seam. I'm going to pin the facing, or this is the side seam, I guess. I'm going to pin the side seam. And you really want to butt those seams, one going one way, one going the other. I'm going to go around to the front and match these up. And you know, I'm okay if my lining is a little big, if I have to take a couple of tucks or something in my lining. I don't think that that's the end of the world. And then this is my facing. I'm going to go all the way around. I'll go back and pin these pieces together, but right now I just want to pin the edge seams. So I'm going to pin the shoulders. These are the junctures that I want to make sure I mark up. My center, well, let's see, where am I going now? That was my center back seam, and then I'm all the way back down again to this front facing. And then my side seam. So I'm going to go back in and pin these gaps, but essentially I have pinned the lining to my jacket all the way around, and I'm going to stitch that. And then I'm going to pull the whole jacket and lining through one of the sleeve openings. Pretty exciting. All right, let's see how this goes. All right, here we are with everything sewn together. It actually surprisingly fit really well, and I was really happy with the way it came together. I started at the bottom back, the center back, because I wanted to make sure that if I ran into a little bit of an issue, I had one little tiny pleat. That's as much fabric I had left over, so I was pretty happy with that. What we're gonna do now is turn it inside right. So we're gonna go through this sleeve and just start grabbing it. And I haven't seen this, so you are going to see this just as I am going to see this. You know, this jacket is a fairly simple pattern, and it eliminates some of the nicer techniques that you would use, like understitching and things, but it's a free pattern, and certainly I like the pattern. I think I might do things a little differently if I made it again, but it is a very stylish jacket. Okay, now I have to get the second sleeve. It's all out except for this one sleeve. I need to get the lining of this sleeve out where it should go, or into where it should go. There we go. Look at that. So here is our jacket, and again, there's some fluffing and folding. Normally there would be understitching around this area. You could certainly top stitch it. It's going to need a good press. I'll turn it back around the other way and press it before. Oops, I got to get this sleeve in here too. Shove that down in there. But yeah, it looks good. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm really happy with it. I love the red lining. I love the jacket. Even with the pockets on backwards, I still love the jacket. What I'm going to do is turn it back around, give it a good press, try to press the seams open a little bit, and then that will help with this like kind of waffly edge here. Then once that's done and I turn it back and I press it, you can have a couple of options. You can top stitch this if you want to keep it in place. Now, to deal with this problem at the bottom where my lining for sure is going to show on the other side, it already does. After I press it and I make sure that I'm very happy with where it is, just a little bit above where the lining hem is, I'm going to pull it up just a smidge so the brown rolls forward. So after it's pressed, I'm going to pull this just at the back of the hem, and I'm going to put a little hand stitch there to hold it in place. So I have 3 seams. I have the side seam, I have the side seam, I have the center back seam, and the other side seam, and that will help keep my lining from hanging down below my jacket, which I don't want. The seams, the rest of the seam, the brown on the brown, I'm okay if you see a little bit of that. That's not, and they're going to stretch at the same rate, but I'm just afraid that this red fabric, I could probably even do it here right at the bottom edge where my facing comes to meet my lining. Just a smidge, you know, a 1/4 of an inch, and it'll be just enough so the lining isn't hanging. And then if I just do a couple of quick tacking stitches, you know, 2 inches from the hem, that will keep the lining in place and I can still enjoy this really pretty red line. The thing that we need to do is to put a button on it. It calls for a button. Am I going to put a button on? Maybe. It's not necessary. You know, you can wear these jackets without a button. So I think I'm going to forego the button and just leave the jacket the way it is. Very simple and clean. But we'll see. I'll try it on. Try it on with the pants, you know, and see if I really want a button. But you would put 1 button here with a buttonhole. And are they marked on here? Side, front. There is no mark for, this is the facing here. So there is no mark for the button. So you kind of have to eyeball that if you want to put a button on. So definitely you try it on, pin it, see where you want that button. I kind of like it straight without the button. Why complicate things? But that is a style choice, just like the backwards pockets, which I will talk about every time I put this jacket on. But I still love it. I still love it. And wait till you see it on the pockets, you won't even notice it. I'm really happy with the way it came out. So I hope you get to make one. All right, with this kind of turned seam, it doesn't lie. It's really hard to press without getting a crease in here. So I've opened up this edge and I'm going to hit it with the spinner and then roll it. I'm going to roll it so the seam is a little bit towards the inside, all the way around except for the lapel over here, because that rolls to the outside, so the seam edge will roll on the reverse side, because when the lapel folds open, you don't want to see the seam edge. So this is going to help with this kind of not crisp edge, but I think I'm going to have to top stitch this. I think it's the only way to keep this from rolling around. I mean, it looks nice now, but as soon as I put it on, it gets like bouncy. And part of that's because of the fabric, but I am going to put a row of top stitching on here. It will just keep it neat and structured. It will look a little better. It looks sloppy right now, and that's because the way we bagged it, there's no understitching here, and the understitching would make a big difference. It would help keep this from rolling, and right now, no matter what I do to it, it's just going to keep rolling this way. So I think I definitely need to do a row of top stitching. So I'm going to finish pressing this and do the top stitching. All right, so we finished up our jacket here. I top stitched all the way around the outside edge, and we talked about the ironing because this is going to roll back, right? This shawl collar is going to roll back, so we want to kind of have the seam roll to the underside all the way around the jacket, except around the shawl collar where we want it rolled around to the front, since this is going to be open and you don't want to see that seam ridge. Now, if you use the jacquard or a wool or something that would press really well, you probably could get away without the top stitching, but the Pontoroma is really bouncy and it needs some structure. If without the bagging, if I was able to understitch this, it would help keep it in place, but it just wasn't going to hold. Another option would be to go in and hand stitch these seams together, and that would kind of keep it in place, but you've got a lot of hand stitching going on there. The other thing is we had to get a little creative with the sleeve. I cut 2 inches off of the lining, off of each sleeve. Now, if your sleeves are the right length, you're going to have to do this by hand. You're not going to be able to use this method. But you want to stick your sleeve inside, your lining inside your sleeve. All right, so you want to make sure that when you pull that through, that the seams are together, right? You don't want the internal sleeve twisted. And then because I was lucky enough to cut off 2 inches of my lining, I'm just going to kind of do a down and dirty seam here. And I'm going to pin the wrong sides of my lining and my sleeve together all the way around and stitch those, because normally you would do it through the hem and you would do the sleeves and pull them through, so you would do them right sides together, but I don't have access to that now because it's all closed up. So I like this pattern. I think it's really interesting, but it doesn't have some of the details that I would really want on a really well constructed jacket. Now this is, with this Pontoroma, this is more like a shacket. It's kind of one of those sweater jackets. So I'm okay with that. It's a little casual and it's soft, and that's fine. It ended up working really well, and I love the pants and I love the cut of the jacket. I just think some of the finishing details I would do a little differently, but certainly for a beginner, it's fine. So what happens is I've sewn this sleeve together. So I sewed the sleeve together, wrong sides together, and when I actually put the jacket on, because the lining is 2 inches shorter now than the sleeve, what I end up with is a hemmed lined sleeve. You can see inside there's my lining, so my sleeve is hemmed, and you could go ahead and top stitch that. I think I'm just going to tack the lining up underneath the arm, and then that will keep the lining from sliding down and the sleeve sliding down. And then our jacket's finished. We are done. And yeah, I love this fabric. This fabric is the best. All right, we finished the Ercilla suit from Sewciety out of this really nice chocolate brown Pontoroma knit. I love it. It's perfect for fall. Chocolate is so everywhere, right? Brown is everywhere, and red is a statement color for this year, so we lined it with some bright red lining. It would look really cute with a red top. I had this, happened to be in my closet. I've had this for years, and it looks great with it. You could wear all kinds of colors, right? With this, I mean, green and blue and white and black would look, black and brown always look really great. So we used this Pontoroma, which kind of gives this jacket more of a casual feel, as opposed to the brocade or the jacquard that they used in on the Mood website. You can see that beautiful bright red fabric is probably going to take the press a little bit better, and will hold these seams a little better than the Pontoroma, which is kind of more like loose. So this is more like a shacket kind of jacket. It's very casual and soft, and that's okay. I'm fine with that. Nobody, at least I don't wear a suit out anymore, and I would throw this on over a dress. Certainly with these pants, it looks great. And the pants, I love the pants. So the pants, again, are made for a woven, but we used them with the Pontoroma. I took them in about 2 sizes, and then used a 3/8 inch seam allowance instead of a 5/8 inch seam allowance. So probably like they went down like almost a size and 3/4, somewhere in that ballpark. Also skinnied up the legs quite a bit. I took an extra maybe 4 inches off of the legs, 2 on the outseam and 2 on the inseam, because the pant is made with a large leg, which looks silly with a knit, so it doesn't work really well with a knit fabric. But with the knit, with the skinny legs and these really nice pockets in the waistband and the zipper, love them. They are so comfy. and the straight leg looks really great with a little pointy toed flat. It's absolutely gorgeous. So make this. This is great. The pattern's free. This Ponte Roma would work up really well for pants. It works great for pants. This little shacket works. A dress. I love Ponte Roma. I use it all the time. I mean, I make leggings and pants and tops, everything. It's so comfy, and it's got some body to it. It's dense. It's not like a t-shirt knit fabric. So it holds up. A princess seam dress, a sheath dress, all kinds of skirts, jackets, again, pants. It works for just about everything. And this time of year, it's warm. It's a little bit heavier. So for fall and winter, it's cozier and warmer than like a soft knit. And it has obviously more structure than some kind of like ITY or something. So this is great. I would say go to my website with the information down below. You can find all the details on the fabric and where to get the pattern and everything else that we talked about in this video. Please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. We would love to have you, and don't forget to tag me on social media with all of your makes, especially the Ercilla suit. Don't forget to tag me with all of your looks on social media at sewing_with_Sandi on Instagram. All right, until next time, happy sewing. Bye.